she threw him out with 2 suitcases and a smile. 5 years later, when the same woman saw his name projected across a ballroom screen, her hands began to shake so hard, she dropped her champagne glass. Boston wore wealth elegantly. It hid old money behind brick facades, polished, pain behind charity boards, and loneliness behind floor-to-ceiling windows. On the 32nd floor of the Hawthorne residence's Vanessa Cole Mercer stood in a silk robe before a mirror wider than most bedrooms, adjusting diamond earrings she had not paid for. Behind her, the city glowed blue with winter dusk. "You're wearing those to a non-profit dinner?" Ethan asked from the doorway. His voice was calm, almost too calm. It was the kind of voice that never entered a room before permission was granted. Vanessa glanced at him through the mirror. They noticed details at these events. "They're raising money for public schools. They're raising status," she corrected. Ethan said nothing. He had learned that silence was often cheaper than truth. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly and a watch so understated no one ever recognized its value. His dark hair was trimmed neatly, his expression unreadable. At 38, Ethan Mercer moved through life with the discipline of a man who had once lost everything, or feared he might. Vanessa often mistook restraint for weakness. She turned and studied him with faint irritation. "You're wearing that tie again. It's a tie. It's a message. And what message is that?" "That my husband has no ambition." A pause settled between them like dust. Most couples filled silence with affection or annoyance. Ethan and Vanessa filled it with history. They had met 7 years earlier in New York, when she was bright, laughing, and hungry in a way he admired. Vanessa came from a middle-class Connecticut family that worshipped appearances and feared mediocrity. Ethan had admired how shamelessly she wanted more. He never told her that he came from the Mercer family. At first, because he wanted to know whether love could survive without introduction. Later, because secrets grow roots. Then marriage happened. Boston happened. Habits happened. Now they lived in a penthouse curated for strangers on social media. Vanessa posted soft focus breakfasts no one ate, anniversary captions written after arguments, and candlelit photos taken beside a husband she barely touched. Tonight, she picked up her clutch and brushed past him. "You coming?" she asked. "I'll meet you there. I have a call." "With your thrilling spreadsheets." "With work." She smiled without warmth. "Try not to be late. People ask what you do, and I hate improvising." The elevator swallowed her. Ethan remained alone in the apartment, listening to the faint mechanical descent. Then he exhaled. On the kitchen island lay Vanessa's second phone. She had forgotten it again. Its screen lit up. "Damien, wear the black dress. Harder to behave around you in black." Ethan stared at the message until the screen dimmed. No rage came. That frightened him more than anger would have. The gala occupied an old marble museum transformed by rented flowers and expensive gilt. Vanessa was already there, laughing too brightly beside Damien Cross. Damien looked engineered for magazine covers. Sun-touched skin, expensive teeth, confidence sharpened into a weapon. He founded a startup that had not yet made profit, but had already made headlines. Boston adored men like him. Vanessa touched Damien's sleeve while speaking, a gesture too casual to accuse, too intimate to ignore. When Ethan approached, Damien extended a hand first. "Ethan, heard a lot about you." "I'm sure you have," Ethan replied. Their handshake lasted half a second. Vanessa's smile tightened. Damien's company is expanding into urban development. Congratulations, Ethan said. Damien tilted his head. Vanessa says you're in finance. Something like that. What kind? The kind that pays mortgages. Damien laughed loudly. Vanessa did too. Later during speeches, Ethan watched from the back of the room while Vanessa leaned toward Damien at their table. She whispered something. Damien's hand brushed the bare skin of her back. No one noticed, or everyone did, and preferred elegance to honesty. An older woman from the board approached Ethan. You must be Vanessa's husband. I am. She's dazzling. She works at it. The woman studied him carefully. And you? What about me? You look like a man who belongs somewhere else. Ethan almost smiled. Maybe I used to. Near midnight, snow began to fall outside. They returned home in silence. Vanessa kicked off her heels near the foyer. You embarrassed me tonight. How? You were cold. I was polite. You were invisible. Ethan removed his cufflinks slowly. You seemed occupied. Her eyes flashed. If you have something to say, say it. He placed her forgotten second phone on the marble counter. The room changed temperature. Vanessa stared at it, then at him, then back at the phone. How long? She asked quietly. Long enough. She crossed her arms. And you said nothing. What was there to say? That you cared. Ethan's laugh was soft and humorless. You mistake noise for caring. She looked suddenly vicious, like shame had nowhere to go except outward. Maybe I cheated because this marriage has been dead for years. Maybe. You never fought for me. I never thought I had to compete for my wife. Her jaw tightened. You know what your problem is, Ethan, she said. You act like you're above everything. Desire, jealousy, passion. You live like a clerk in a luxury apartment, and you live like applause is oxygen. The slap of truth landed harder than any hand. Vanessa grabbed a wine glass and hurled it into the sink. It shattered. Get out. He said nothing. I mean it. Still nothing. Get out. For a moment, both of them seemed startled by the sound of her own voice. Ethan looked at the woman he had once loved enough to lie to. Then he nodded once. He walked into the bedroom, took a suitcase packed with brutal efficiency, and returned wearing his coat. Vanessa stood rigid in the living room, breathing fast. He stopped at the door. If he disappoints you, Ethan said, don't confuse that with what I was. Then he left. No shouting, no begging, no witness. Only the soft click of a closing door. Vanessa stood alone in the perfect apartment surrounded by expensive objects, and the first true silence she had ever earned. By February, Boston had turned gray. Snow along the sidewalks hardened into black ridges. The harbor wind cut through wool coats and polite smiles alike. In the Mercer penthouse, the heat worked perfectly. The appliances gleamed, and two people moved around each other like tenants, sharing expensive space. Vanessa had become luminous in the way some people do when they are being desired elsewhere. She hummed while getting dressed. She changed outfits twice before dinner reservations Ethan was never invited to. She answered texts face down, smiling at nothing. She wore perfume to weekday lunches and came home smelling faintly of hotel lobbies, leather interiors, and someone else's attention. Ethan noticed everything. He noticed because he had always noticed. The missing bracelet returned polished. The sudden interest in Pilates at 7 p.m. 3 nights a week. The manicure color Damien's assistant had complimented publicly on Instagram before Vanessa ever posted it herself. The restaurant tags, the strategic angles in photographs that hid the second wine glass. Most betrayals announced themselves long before confession. They entered through details. "You're quiet lately," Vanessa said one morning as she poured oat milk into coffee neither of them liked. "I've always been quiet." "No, this is different." Ethan folded the financial section of the newspaper. "You seem busy," she smirked. "Jealousy doesn't suit you. Good thing I'm not wearing it." Her expression flickered, annoyed that he would not play the role she had written for him. Vanessa wanted outrage. Outrage would have meant value. Instead, he gave her calm, and calm felt like invisibility to people who measured love in volume. Damien Cross occupied headlines the way some men occupied mirrors. At 36, he was founder of Cross Urban, a company promising to reimagine modern city living through luxury mixed-use developments with rooftop gardens and minimalist slogans. Investors called him visionary. Journalists called him magnetic. Women called him back. He had learned early that confidence could be mistaken for depth. Vanessa met him again at a charity panel on urban revitalization. She wore ivory silk and boredom. Damien wore navy cashmere and certainty. "Still married?" he asked, as if inquiring about weather. She laughed. "Still arrogant, only when rewarded." He bought her a drink she did not need. He listened in the concentrated way ambitious men do when they know attention itself can seduce. He asked about her ideas, her frustrations, the parts of her life she described as wasted. No one had asked her what she wanted in months, perhaps years. "You're too alive to be lonely," Damien told her. It was manipulative. It was effective. He texted before she reached home. "You looked dangerous tonight." Vanessa stared at the screen in the elevator mirror and smiled at a version of herself she thought had returned. The affair began not in bed, but in narrative. Lunches became strategy meetings. Strategy meetings became drinks. Drinks became long drives with no destination. City lights sliding across the windshield, while Damien spoke about expansion vision, private islands, and women who misunderstood their own power, until the right man named it. He sent orchids taller than kitchen counters. He sent handbags wrapped in tissue paper. He sent cars when it rained. He sent messages at midnight, calibrated to feel spontaneous. Ethan said little. Once he passed the hallway console and saw a velvet box unopened beside the keys. "You forgot something," he said. Vanessa glanced up from her laptop. "It's nothing. Nothing usually comes gift-wrapped." She stood and took the box. "You don't get to interrogate me because you finally noticed I exist." I asked a question. You implied one. Then she carried the box to the bedroom and shut the door. Ethan remained in the hallway, listening not to the door, but to the speed of his own heartbeat. He had negotiated mergers colder than this. Yet, nothing in business prepared a man for watching someone replace him 1 inch at a time. At Cross Urban's spring launch party, Vanessa arrived on Damien's arm. Officially, she was a guest. Unofficially, she was a statement. The venue overlooked the Charles River, all glass walls and strategic candlelight. Influencers moved through the room like migrating birds. A violinist played near an LED wall, looping Damien's face beside architectural renderings. Vanessa wore black, the same black Damien had once requested by text. He introduced her to investors, council members, editors, women who assessed her in one glance, and men who smiled too long. Cameras flashed. Champagne rose endlessly. For 3 hours, she felt chosen. Then she saw Ethan. He stood alone near the bar, in a dark suit, speaking quietly with an older man Damien had been trying to impress for months, Harold Levinson, chair of one of the largest private capital groups in the Northeast. Damien stiffened when he noticed. "You invited him?" Vanessa asked. "I didn't." Damien's smile never moved. "Interesting." Across the room, Harold laughed at something Ethan said. Then Harold shook Ethan's hand with unusual warmth. Vanessa frowned. "How do you know Levinson?" Ethan answered before Damien could. "We've met," where she asked. "Different life." He nodded politely to her, then to Damien, and walked away before either could respond. For the first time all evening, Damien looked unsettled. "Who exactly is your husband?" Vanessa asked. Damien adjusted his cuff. "Apparently better connected than advertised." The answer irritated her more than ignorance would have. That night, Damien's penthouse in Back Bay was all steel art books and windows too clean to trust. Vanessa stood near the glass while the city glittered below. "You're distracted," Damien said, loosening his tie. "I'm thinking. Dangerous hobby." She turned. "Do you know Ethan?" "I know men like Ethan." "That's not what I asked." Damien poured 2 drinks. "He's cautious, educated, probably richer than he looks, poorer than he should be. Men who hide competence usually want admiration for humility. You dislike him. I dislike mysteries." He handed her a glass, then touched her wrist. "You're here," he said softly. "Why waste the night talking about another man?" She let herself be kissed, not because it was love, not because it was hunger, because being wanted loudly felt easier than being loved quietly. Ethan did not call. He did not text. When Vanessa returned home after 1 in the morning, the apartment lights were dim, except for the study. He sat at the desk, reviewing documents, reading glasses low on his nose. "You're awake," she said. "I live here." She set down her purse harder than necessary. "You could ask where I was." "I know where you were." Her breath caught. He removed the glasses. "The question is whether you know." She stared at him, anger rushing in to save her from shame. "You think silence makes you superior?" "No," he said. "I think silence keeps me from saying things I can't take back." She waited for accusation, for pleading, for collapse. Instead, he returned to the papers. Dismissed by composure, she felt smaller than if he had screamed. "You should fight for me," she said suddenly. He looked up, genuinely puzzled. "Why?" The words struck like ice water. Vanessa turned and walked to the bedroom, slamming the door with enough force to shake framed photographs along the hallway wall. One of them tilted crooked. Neither fixed it. Later, long after midnight, Ethan entered the dark kitchen and poured a glass of water. His phone vibrated once. A message from New York. "Father hospitalized. Call immediately." He stared at the screen, then at the skyline beyond the glass. Everything in his life, hidden and visible, had begun to move. March arrived with rain instead of snow. Boston streets reflected headlights like broken mirrors, and the city smelled of wet stone diesel and thawing secrets. Outside the Hawthorne residences, umbrellas tilted against the wind. Inside the Mercer penthouse, the silence had become so practiced it almost felt civilized. Vanessa no longer bothered to hide everything. That was the final stage of contempt, not deception, but confidence. She took calls on the balcony with the door half open. She laughed at messages while Ethan sat 3 feet away. She came home wearing men's cologne she claimed was from crowded elevators. Sometimes she mentioned Damien's name, casually dropping it into conversation like a coin to hear whether jealousy made a sound. It never did. That enraged her more each time. Ethan moved through the apartment with measured calm. He cooked for one. He answered emails late into the night. He spoke politely when spoken to. If pain touched him, it did so privately. But private pain still leaves traces. He had stopped sleeping well. Coffee tasted metallic. His jaw ached from clenching in dreams he never remembered. He was not indifferent. He was enduring. On a Thursday evening, Vanessa hosted 6 guests for cocktails. She informed Ethan by text. People coming at 8. Don't make it weird. At 7:54, he returned from the office to find candles lit, jazz playing, and strangers admiring art he had paid for. Vanessa wore a fitted emerald dress. Damien stood beside the bar, opening a bottle of champagne, as though he owned the room. For 1 second, no one moved. Then Vanessa smiled brightly. There he is. Ethan. You remember Damien? I remember the volume, Ethan said. A nervous laugh moved through the guests. Damien raised the bottle. Join us, no. Vanessa's eyes sharpened. Don't be rude. It's difficult to compete with such polished manners. One of the women pretended to check her phone. Another guest wandered toward the windows, suddenly fascinated by weather. Vanessa stepped closer, voice low. Can you not do this tonight? Do not be bitter. He looked around the room. You invited your lover into my home. Our home, she snapped. Ethan's gaze drifted over the marble counters, the imported lighting, the paintings selected by consultants, the deed in a safe she had never opened. Then back to her. Is that what you think this is? The question landed somewhere she did not like. Damien intervened smoothly. Maybe I should go. Yes, Ethan said. No, Vanessa said at the same time. Everyone heard it. Damien's smile thinned. Vanessa. She straightened her shoulders. No one is leaving because Ethan wants to sulk. Ethan picked up his keys from the console. I'm saving myself the boredom. He walked out to a chorus of held breath. Behind him, jazz continued. Someone turned it off. He drove nowhere for an hour. Rain streaked across the windshield. Traffic lights changed for no reason that mattered. Boston blurred into bridges, brick, and memory. At a red light, his phone rang. New York. He answered immediately. His father's longtime attorney, Leonard Hale, spoke in the clipped tone of men who bill by the minute and grieve by appointment. Your father's condition is worsening. I was told he stabilized. He did. Briefly. Ethan gripped the steering wheel. You should come soon, Leonard said. There are matters requiring your presence. I'm still deciding. Your father made many mistakes, Leonard replied. But dying tends to shorten arguments. The line ended. Rain hammered harder. Ethan rested his forehead briefly against the wheel. He had spent years building distance from the Mercer name. Now, the life he abandoned was calling at exactly the moment the life he chose had collapsed. When he returned after midnight, the apartment was dark except for the kitchen lights. Broken crystal had been cleaned. Perfume still hung in the air like accusation. Vanessa sat at the island barefoot, drinking white wine from a mug. You embarrassed me, she said, before he removed his coat. You've become repetitive. You stormed out in front of investors. You invited an affair into the house. You abandoned the room. You abandoned the marriage. Her mug hit the counter. There it is, she said. Finally, A pulse. He placed his keys down carefully. You wanted honesty. No, I wanted a husband who fought for something. I did. She laughed bitterly. For what routine discount loyalty? Your spreadsheets and silence. For us. The room went still. Vanessa blinked as if she had not expected that answer. Then anger rushed in to protect her again. You don't even know what love is. And Damien does. He makes me feel alive. He makes you feel watched. Her face hardened. At least he sees me. I saw you. Ethan said quietly. Before you became this. She stood so quickly the stool tipped backward. Say it. Go ahead. Call me selfish. Call me a whore. That would at least sound human. I'm trying not to say cruel things to someone already destroying herself. The words struck deeper than insult. Vanessa's eyes glistened, not with sadness, but fury at being understood. You think you're better than everyone, she whispered. No. I think I made the mistake of loving someone who confuses admiration with love. She moved past him, heels sharp against hardwood, into the bedroom. Drawers slammed, closet doors banged. A suitcase rolled violently across the floor. Ethan did not follow. When she returned, she was dragging one of his suitcases with both hands. Rain lashed the windows. She yanked open the apartment door and shoved the suitcase into the hallway. Get out! He looked at the suitcase, then at her. Vanessa, don't use that calm voice with me. She disappeared again and came back with another bag, throwing it after the first. Get out. The second suitcase hit the wall and fell sideways, spilling shirts partly into the corridor. Neighbors' doors remained closed. Luxury buildings are designed to protect wealth, not dignity. Ethan walked to the bedroom without speaking. Vanessa stood breathing hard, expecting pleading rage, resistance, something cinematic enough to justify her own cruelty. Instead, he returned, carrying only 3 things: a wool coat over one arm, his watch in his hand, a small leather folder. He set the watch on his wrist, buttoned the coat, and left the rest where it lay. You're really going? She asked, suddenly uncertain. He paused at the threshold. You already made sure I left long ago. Something flickered in her face, fear perhaps, or the first crack in certainty. You'll regret this, she said, because power often speaks last. No, Ethan replied, you will. Then he stepped into the hallway. No shouting, no slammed door, only the soft click of the latch behind him. He rode the elevator alone. In the mirrored walls, he looked like a man between identities. When the doors opened to the lobby, the doorman rose quickly. Mr. Mercer, should I call a car? Ethan nodded once. Outside, rain soaked the city clean. He stood beneath the awning with one suitcase, one coat, one watch, and the last intact piece of himself. His phone vibrated. Leonard Hale, your father passed away at 12:17 a.m. Please come to New York, it's time. Ethan stared at the message while thunder rolled over the harbor. Then he stepped into the waiting car without looking back. New York was colder than Boston, not in temperature, but in memory. The city greeted Ethan Mercer before dawn with wet asphalt, sleepless towers, and the indifferent glow of windows where strangers made fortunes or mistakes behind glass. As the car crossed into Manhattan, he watched the skyline sharpen through rain-streaked glass and felt the old sensation return, the one he had spent nearly a decade trying to outrun. Inheritance was not always money. Sometimes it was pressure. Sometimes it was guilt. Sometimes it was a surname people spoke before they ever met you. The driver turned onto Fifth Avenue and stopped before a limestone building whose facade looked less like a residence than a declaration. Mercer House, 4 stories of old architecture and private silence. The brass doors opened before he reached them. Mr. Mercer, the doorman, said softly. Ethan hated how natural that sounded. Inside the foyer smelled of polished wood orchids and expensive restraint. Portraits of dead relatives lined the walls with the same expression, ownership mistaken for virtue. Leonard Hale waited in the library. At 72, the family attorney looked exactly as Ethan remembered: trim, suit, silver hair, eyes trained to reveal nothing unless billed. You came quickly. My father is dead. That tends to accelerate schedules. Ethan removed his coat. How did it happen? Cardiac arrest. Peacefully according to staff, unpeacefully according to his final quarter reports. Even now, Leonard could not resist dryness. Was he alone? Ethan asked. The old man paused. Yes. Something in Ethan's jaw tightened. For all his power, Richard Mercer had died the way many powerful men did, surrounded by service, absent of intimacy. Leonard handed him a folder. The board meets tomorrow morning. They expect direction. They have executives. They have employees. They need authority. I left this family years ago. Leonard adjusted his glasses. The family noticed. Richard Mercer had built Mercer Global from a shipping company into a sprawling empire of logistics, commercial real estate, private equity, and technology acquisitions. The company touched ports, hospitals, apartment towers, software systems, and political donations across 3 continents. He also built his son the way he built companies, through control. Ethan grew up in rooms where mistakes were archived and affection was conditional. Tutors replaced childhood. Internships replaced summers. By 25, he could read a balance sheet faster than poetry and negotiate harder than men twice his age. At 28, he told his father no for the first time. I don't want this life. Richard Mercer did not look up from his desk. Then you're weaker than I thought. I want to build something myself. You want applause for refusing privilege. I want freedom. His father finally raised his eyes. Freedom is what mediocre people call responsibility they cannot carry. Ethan left that afternoon. No dramatic scene, no trust fund tantrum. He resigned from the company, refused family money, changed apartments, and took a mid-level finance position under a shortened resume. No one linked to Mercer Global. For years, tabloids speculated scandal. There was none, only estrangement. Then he met Vanessa. He never told her the full truth because for the first time, he wanted to be chosen without the weight of legacy. That lie had cost him more than honesty ever would have. By noon, condolence calls flooded Mercer House. Governors, CEOs, charities, rivals pretending grief. Ethan ignored most of them. He stood alone in his father's study, staring at the desk where so many arguments had ended before they began. On the blotter lay a sealed envelope with his name written in Richard Mercer's severe handwriting. He opened it. Ethan, if you are reading this, then I lost the race before you did. You were wrong to leave the company. I was wrong to think leaving meant weakness. You built a life without my name. That is more than most heirs ever achieve. The board trusts fear. I never learned trust. Perhaps you did. Take the company or sell it, but do not let smaller men inherit what larger men built badly. Father Ethan read it twice, then a third time. No apology, no tenderness. And yet, from Richard Mercer, it was the closest thing either had ever been offered. The boardroom on the 48th floor overlooked Midtown like a throne room redesigned by consultants. 12 directors sat around the table. Some respected him, some underestimated him. Some hoped he would decline so they could divide power quietly. Margaret Shaw, interim chair, folded her hands. Mr. Mercer, first, our condolences. Thank you. We understand this is sudden. It is. We also understand you have been absent from corporate affairs. The pause around absent carried judgment. Ethan sat at the head of the table anyway. I've been working. A few exchanged glances. In what capacity? One director asked. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were acquisition records, portfolio statements, and partnership filings from the private investment firm Ethan had built discreetly over 7 years. Assets under management staggering. Returns exceptional. Strategic holdings deeply relevant to Mercer Global's current vulnerabilities. Silence moved around the room. Another director cleared his throat. This is yours, yes. Margaret's brows lifted. You built this independently? Yes. Without Mercer backing, yes. He let the word settle each time like stone. The oldest director leaned back slowly. Then why live like a mid-level employee in Boston? Ethan's expression did not change. Because I wanted to know who would respect me without borrowed power. No one asked the obvious follow-up. How many had failed that test? Margaret straightened. What are you proposing? That I assume interim control immediately? And if we refuse? He opened a second folder. Then by market open, I begin acquiring enough vulnerable debt positions to make refusal expensive. Several directors stiffened. Leonard, seated quietly near the wall, almost smiled. There he is, the old man likely thought. The son both inherited and escaped. Margaret exhaled once. Motion to appoint Ethan Mercer as executive chairman effective immediately. Hands rose, one by one, even the reluctant ones. Power often persuades those unmoved by sentiment. That evening, financial media broke the story. Estranged heir returns to lead Mercer Global after founder's death. Who is Ethan Mercer, the quiet successor? Wall Street missed New York's most eligible bachelor. Back in play. He hated the last headline most. His phone buzzed continuously. He ignored nearly all of it, until one number from Boston appeared. Vanessa. He watched it ring, then stop, then ring again, then stop, then a text. Why is your face on CNBC? Another. Who are you? He stared at the screen for a long moment, then set the phone face down. Late that night, Ethan stood alone in the penthouse atop Mercer Tower, a residence prepared for him years ago and never used. The city below glittered like circuitry. On the kitchen counter sat a bottle of scotch he did not open. He loosened his tie and looked out at Manhattan, where wealth moved like weather and secrets were simply another currency. He thought of Vanessa in Boston, probably replaying every dinner, every argument, every moment she mistook humility for inadequacy. He thought of the apartment hallway, the suitcases, the rain. He felt no triumph, only distance. Leonard entered quietly from the private elevator. "Sorry to interrupt." "You already did." The old attorney nodded toward the skyline. "Regret looks expensive from up here." "I'm not sure whose regret you mean." Leonard handed him tomorrow's schedule. Interviews, investor calls, memorial arrangements. Then he hesitated. "She called Mercer House too." Ethan said nothing. "Asking to speak with you, and I informed her there was no Mrs. Mercer listed here." The words were dry, but not cruel. After Leonard left, Ethan stood in silence. For years he had buried the Mercer name to become someone real. Now the name had returned, and with it came the unsettling truth. He had lost his marriage the moment he no longer needed to prove who he was. In Boston, Vanessa sat alone in the dark penthouse, television light flickering across her face as Ethan's image filled the screen. The caption beneath him read, "Ethan Mercer, new executive chairman, Mercer Global." Her champagne glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. For the first time since he left, she understood what silence had been hiding, and it terrified her. 5 years changed people differently. For some time, sharpened character. For others, it simply exposed what had always been there. New York had remade Ethan Mercer in the public eye. Though the truth was more complicated, it had merely placed him where he had always been heading. He became known in financial circles as a man who never raised his voice and rarely repeated himself. Meetings started on time when Ethan attended. Deals collapsed when he left the room. Journalists called him enigmatic because they could not sell discipline as easily as scandal. He did not chase cameras. He did not attend parties without purpose. He did not date publicly. That last detail fascinated the culture pages most. "America loves a widower story," Leonard Hale muttered once while reviewing headlines in the back of a town car. "I'm not widowed," Ethan said. "Emotionally, perhaps." Ethan glanced out the window. "You're underpaid," Leonard smiled. "I'm vastly overinformed." Mercer Global expanded under Ethan's leadership with surgical precision. Wasteful divisions were sold. Debt was refinanced. New investments in green infrastructure and logistics technology positioned the company ahead of competitors who still believed prestige could substitute for strategy. Employees respected him because he listened. Executives feared him because he remembered. He could recall numbers from reports, others skimmed promises people made, casually lies disguised as optimism. He was not cruel. Cruelty wastes energy. He was exact. That frightened people more. At 43, Ethan lived in a penthouse overlooking Central Park and used only 3 rooms regularly. The kitchen, the study, the bedroom. Everything else existed for architects and tax filings. His mornings began before sunrise with a run, black coffee and briefings. His evenings often ended under the glow of spreadsheets or city lights. Success had texture, glass, steel, polished wood, but not always warmth. Sometimes late at night, he thought of Boston, not Vanessa specifically at first, just the version of himself who had still believed simplicity could protect love. Then memory narrowed. Her laugh in the kitchen years before contempt replaced it. The smell of rain that final night. The sound of glass breaking when truth entered a room. He never called. Pride had little to do with it. Some doors closed because opening them again would damage the house. Vanessa Cole learned a harsher version of time. At first, Ethan's departure had seemed survivable. She still had Damien. She still had invitations. She still had beauty sharpened by expensive maintenance and the social instincts of someone who knew how to belong anywhere glamorous for exactly one evening. She moved into Damien's Back Bay penthouse 6 months after Ethan left. Online, they looked unstoppable. Weekend flights to Miami, charity galas, architectural digest features, photos of rooftop dinners captioned with words like gratitude and building together. But public glamour often functions like stage lighting, bright enough to hide the cracks. Damien grew impatient with domesticity quickly. He liked entrances more than continuity. He liked being wanted more than being known. He liked Vanessa most when other men envied him. When she questioned late nights, he called her insecure. When she asked about finances, he called her dramatic. When she suggested commitment, he kissed her forehead and changed the subject. She had once mistaken intensity for devotion. Now she mistook avoidance for complexity. The collapse began with an article. A local investigative reporter published documents alleging cross-urban, inflated occupancy projections, misused investor funds, and routed expenses through shell vendors tied to Damien's friends. Within 48 hours, lenders demanded explanations. Within a week, regulators requested records. Within a month, partners stopped returning calls. Damien went on television, wearing a navy suit and controlled outrage. These allegations are politically motivated, he declared. Markets were unimpressed. Vanessa watched from the marble kitchen island, while makeup artists powdered the man who once made every room tilt toward him. "You told me everything was fine," she said after cameras left. "It is fine. The FBI was downstairs. They talked to everyone. Why are their bankers calling at midnight?" He loosened his tie violently. "Because panic is contagious and idiots breed fast." She stared at him. For the first time, he looked small. Not physically, structurally. Like a building whose facade remained standing after the support beams had rotted. The social world withdrew with professional speed. Invitations slowed, then vanished. Friends who once texted hourly began responding in polite delays. Brands no longer sent products. Hosts apologized that seating was very tight this year. Women who had borrowed handbags now forgot birthdays. Men who had flirted at fundraisers no longer recognized her in restaurants. Vanessa learned the first law of status. Many people do not love you. They love being near what you currently represent. She moved out before the creditors did. Damien barely argued. "Take whatever you want," he said, staring at legal notices across the dining table. "I wanted honesty years ago." "No," he replied coldly. "You wanted winning." She almost slapped him. Instead, she laughed, once short, ugly, involuntary. Because he was right enough to hurt. She rented a smaller condo in Cambridge and told everyone she preferred privacy now. Privacy was cheaper than admitting exile. She launched a boutique consulting business advising lifestyle brands on image strategy. Some months it worked. Most months it resembled expensive unemployment. At 40, mirrors became negotiations. Filters replaced confidence. Wine became weekday furniture. Sometimes she searched Ethan online late at night. Photos from conferences in Singapore, panels in Davos, a handshake with senators. An interview in Forbes where he spoke calmly about long-term stewardship and ethical leverage. He looked older, sharper, untouched by the chaos that had swallowed everyone around him. She hated that she still noticed how handsome he was when he wasn't trying. She hated more that he never publicly mentioned her. No bitter quotes, no memoir hints, no revenge. He had erased her with dignity. That was harder to survive than scandal. One autumn afternoon, Vanessa attended a luncheon hoping to meet potential clients. At the next table, two younger women whispered while scrolling their phones. "That's him," one said. "Mercer. God, he's terrifying. He fired a vice president in 6 words." "What 6 words? You knew. You signed anyway. Goodbye." They giggled. Vanessa looked over. On the screen was Ethan, entering a courthouse for a corporate hearing court. Buttoned expression, unreadable cameras, shouting questions he ignored. The women sighed, the way people do around power they will never meet. Vanessa nearly laughed. They saw a fantasy. She remembered the man who made coffee quietly and folded sweaters with military precision. She remembered the husband she called boring. Regret does not arrive dramatically. It accumulates in ordinary moments until breathing around it becomes work. That winter, Damien was indicted on fraud-related charges. The headlines were brutal. Cross urban founder, accused of misleading investors, former Boston Golden Boy faces federal case. Vanessa stared at the articles in silence. She felt no loyalty left to offer, only exhaustion. Later that evening, her phone rang from an unknown New York number. She almost ignored it, then answered. "Miss Cole," a polished female voice asked. "Yes, this is the office of Mercer Global Foundation. We are confirming attendance for the Whitmore Children's Hospital Gala next month. You were listed by a sponsor from prior years." Vanessa's pulse shifted. "Will Mr. Mercer be attending?" A pause. "Yes, ma'am. Mr. Mercer is this year's keynote benefactor." After the call ended, Vanessa sat motionless in her kitchen. Snow drifted beyond the window. 5 years of pride, anger, and self-protection suddenly felt thin as paper. She rose, walked to the bathroom mirror, and studied the face looking back, then whispered to no one, "What have I done?" Across Manhattan, Ethan stood in his office, after midnight, reviewing briefing notes for the same gala. Leonard entered carrying a folder. "She'll be there," he said. Ethan did not look up. Who Leonard set the folder down. The only person in New England still capable of distracting you with one syllable. Ethan closed the file slowly. Outside, the city glowed with the confidence of people who had never been left. "Then let's hope," Ethan said quietly. "I've improved my concentration." The Whitmore Children's Hospital Gala had always been less about charity than choreography. Money moved there in tuxedos. Philanthropy arrived draped in couture. Men who underpaid workers pledged 7 figures beneath chandeliers, while women who despised each other complimented dresses with surgical precision. The ballroom of the Grand Regent Hotel glittered like a jewel box designed by accountants. Vanessa Cole stood in front of the mirrored wall near the entrance, adjusting an earring she could no longer truly afford. Her black gown was elegant and rented. Her diamonds were real and inherited from her grandmother. Her confidence was assembled minutes at a time. Tonight mattered. Her consulting firm had lost 2 clients in 3 months. Credit card balances had become strategic concerns. A skincare startup founder from Connecticut had agreed to meet her here, and 2 potential angel investors were rumored to attend. In Boston's upper circle's collapse was survivable if no one watched it happen. She intended to remain unobserved. Vanessa. She turned to find Elise Harrow, Once a frequent lunch companion, now the kind of woman who remembered friendships only in public. "You look incredible," Elise said. "You too." They kissed air beside each other's cheeks. "Still doing branding?" Elise asked. "Selective partnerships now. How chic. Translation unemployed with vocabulary." Vanessa smiled anyway. Social life was theater. She had once starred in it. Now she auditioned. The ballroom filled steadily. Waiters moved like disciplined ghosts with champagne trays. A string quartet performed songs originally written for people who would have hated violins. Auction items stood under spotlights: vacations, watches, private dinners, paintings chosen for tax efficiency. Vanessa scanned faces: investors, founders, doctors, a hedge fund manager she once flirted with, who now pretended not to know her. She approached Martin Doyle, an aging venture capitalist with a fondness for women who laughed at his jokes. "Martin." He blinked, then smiled slowly. "Vanessa Cole. Boston still has its weather, I see. And New York still has its charm. Barely." They exchanged pleasantries until she steered toward business. "I'd love to tell you about a consumer wellness brand I'm advising." He lifted a champagne glass. "Send materials to my office," meaning no. She recognized rejection in fluent dialect. As he drifted away, Vanessa felt that old panic rise, the one status once anesthetized. She needed a win tonight, a client, a promise, proof she had not become a cautionary tale in expensive heels. Then the house lights dimmed slightly. Conversations thinned. People turned toward the entrance. Something in the room changed before she knew why. He entered without spectacle. No entourage, no grin for cameras. No need. Ethan Mercer walked into the ballroom in a midnight tuxedo tailored with ruthless simplicity, one hand in his pocket, the other greeting no one first. Yet people moved toward him instinctively, the way tides acknowledge the moon. Vanessa forgot to breathe. He looked older by a handful of years and stronger by many more. The softness she once mistook for passivity had hardened into composure. His hair was shorter, touched faintly at the temples, with silver that made him seem less distant, not more. His face held the same restraint, but now restraint read as authority. The room gathered around him. Board members crossed floors to shake his hand. Hospital trustees brightened visibly. A senator waited his turn. Ethan nodded, listened, replied briefly. He smiled once, and the gesture was rare enough to matter. No raised voice, no dramatic entrance. Still, he commanded the room more completely than Damien Cross ever had, with microphones and mirrors. Vanessa's champagne glass slipped in her hand. It struck the marble floor and shattered. Heads turned. She barely noticed. "Are you all right?" Elise whispered. "Yes." She was not. Across the room, Ethan glanced toward the sound. Their eyes met for the first time in 5 years. No shock appeared on his face. No anger, no satisfaction. Only recognition, cool and complete, like reading a familiar headline from years ago. Then someone spoke to him, and he looked away. The dismissal hit harder than any scene could have. Elise followed her stare and inhaled sharply. "You know Ethan Mercer?" Vanessa's throat tightened. "I used to." Elise's brows rose with predatory curiosity. How Vanessa looked at the broken glass near her feet, poorly. At dinner place cards seated Vanessa 3 tables from the stage and worlds away from Ethan. She watched him in fragments, accepting greetings from surgeons, leaning toward an elderly donor so she would not need to stand, reading briefing notes with quick concentration, thanking waitstaff by name. Power, she realized, looked different when it did not beg to be seen. The MC took the stage and praised community leadership, visionary generosity, strategic philanthropy, phrases polished enough to mean nothing. Then came the announcement. This year's lead benefactor has funded pediatric oncology wings in 3 cities, endowed scholarships for nursing students, and asked that much of it remain private. Please welcome Mr. Ethan Mercer. Applause rose fast and genuine. Vanessa felt every hand in the room striking against her ribs. Ethan reached the podium. No teleprompter, no theatrics. Thank you, he said. His voice carried easily. When children enter hospitals, they do not care who donated the walls. They care whether pain is treated, whether fear is eased, whether someone returns when promised. The ballroom quieted. We often confuse generosity with visibility. They are not the same thing. A few people shifted, suddenly aware of their own sponsorship tables. My father believed buildings outlast people. He was often right. But kindness outlasts buildings, and neglect can live inside beautiful architecture. He paused only once. So tonight, give, because someone needs help, not because anyone is watching. Then he stepped back. Less than 3 minutes. The room rose in a standing ovation. Vanessa remained seated, unable to trust her knees. She remembered mocking his quietness. Now, an entire ballroom listened for it. After the speech, people swarmed him. Executives, donors, press. Vanessa watched women 20 years younger angle for introductions, and men twice his age seek approval with practiced humility. Ethan navigated them with the same calm he once used, making coffee in a kitchen she no longer owned. Martin Doyle reappeared beside Vanessa. You know Mercer personally, he asked. She chose caution. We were married. He nearly choked on laughter before realizing she was serious. My God, the words spread faster than gossip should. By dessert, 3 people had found excuses to speak with her. Not because they cared, because proximity to power revives old furniture. Vanessa excused herself and walked toward the terrace doors for air. Hands trembled despite years of training them not to. Outside, winter wind cut clean across the balcony. She gripped the railing. You always hated crowds. His voice behind her was low, unchanged enough to wound. She turned slowly. Ethan stood a few feet away, coat over one arm. I didn't know you'd come out here, she said. I saw broken glass and assumed weather might be safer. Even now, dry humor. I'm sorry about the interruption. It wasn't one. Silence stretched between them, crowded with years. You look well, she managed. You look tired. The honesty stunned her. I deserved that. It wasn't meant as punishment. He looked past her, toward the city. Boston lights blinked below like signals no one answered. I heard about Damien, Ethan said. She laughed, once brittle. Everyone did. And your business surviving. He nodded as if survival were respectable, which made her want to cry. I didn't know about your father, she said softly. Back then? No, he replied. You knew enough. The words landed without cruelty, which made them sharper. Vanessa swallowed. I was young. We were both adults. I was stupid. That came later. For a second, she almost smiled through humiliation. Then she looked at him fully. Why didn't you tell me who you were? Ethan met her eyes. Because I wanted to know who you were. She had no answer, none that could survive truth. Inside, applause erupted again as another auction lot closed. Outside, the wind moved between them like judgment. Ethan glanced toward the ballroom doors. "I have to go back in." "Ethan." He paused. The old instinct to plead rose too late. "I'm glad you're doing well," she said instead. He studied her face with unreadable patience. "I hope one day," he said quietly, "you learn the difference between doing well and looking like it." Then he returned inside. Vanessa remained alone on the terrace, hearing laughter through glass thick enough to keep warmth in and regret out. For the first time in years, she understood fear, not of poverty, not of gossip, but of having seen clearly too late. Midnight made honest people tired and dishonest people emotional. The gala ended in waves of departing perfume, valet tickets, and practiced gratitude. Donors lingered near exits to be seen leaving. Staff dismantled floral arrangements worth more than some monthly rents. Outside the Grand Regent Hotel, Boston glistened under freezing rain. Vanessa waited across the street beneath the awning of a closed cafe. Her heels hurt. Her mascara held. Her composure did not. She had watched Ethan for the last hour through ballroom glass, shaking hands, thanking trustees, listening with patient authority. He belonged to every room she had once dragged him through, and he wore belonging lightly. That was the cruelest part. He had not become arrogant with power. He had become more himself. When his black sedan pulled toward the curb, she stepped forward before courage could expire. "Ethan." The driver hesitated. Ethan, seated in the back, looked up from his phone. He lowered the window halfway. Rain tapped the roof between them. "Vanessa, I need 5 minutes." "I doubt that." "Please." He studied her face as if assessing whether the request was practical, not emotional. Then he nodded once. "Get in." The car smelled faintly of leather and cedar. She sat opposite him in the rear cabin, separated by polished space and years neither could touch. The city moved outside in wet streaks of light. Neither spoke for several blocks. Finally, Ethan said, "Where am I taking you?" "I don't know. That makes one of us." She almost laughed, then didn't. "Can we talk somewhere private?" He gave the driver an address. 10 minutes later, they entered a quiet members' library attached to one of Mercer Global's historic properties. After-hours access required keys, reputation, or inheritance. Ethan possessed all three. The room was lined with dark shelves and amber lamps. Firelight moved softly across leather chairs no one slouched in. Vanessa stood near the mantel while Ethan removed his coat. He remained standing. She noticed that immediately. He would not make this comfortable. "I was wrong," she said. The sentence sounded smaller aloud than it had in her head. Ethan waited. "I was selfish, shallow. I cared too much about appearances. I thought excitement meant love. I thought..." She swallowed. "I thought I had time to fix things later." Still nothing from him. "I was young." He tilted his head slightly. "You were 35. I mean emotionally. That is often what adults say when consequences arrive." The words were calm, almost gentle. They hurt more than anger. Vanessa clasped her hands to stop them shaking. "I know I don't deserve anything from you." "Correct. But I need you to know I'm sorry." He crossed to the bar, poured water into a crystal glass, and handed it to her. She took it automatically. He poured nothing for himself. "You've said sorry," he replied. "Now what is it you actually want?" She stared. What? You didn't wait in the rain to donate remorse. What do you want? There it was. The old Ethan she had overlooked, the man who could strip ornament from motive in one sentence. She looked down. I want another chance. With what? With us. The room became impossibly still. Even the fire seemed embarrassed. Ethan walked to the window overlooking the sleeping city. When he spoke, his back remained turned. Do you know what was hardest after you threw me out? Her throat tightened. Ethan, no. Listen. He faced the glass. It wasn't losing the apartment. It wasn't learning strangers knew before I admitted it to myself. It wasn't even Damien. His reflection looked older in the dark pane. It was realizing I had spent years shrinking myself so someone else could feel taller. Vanessa's eyes filled instantly. I never asked you to shrink. You rewarded it every time I did. She shook her head. I didn't understand. I know. Then why punish me forever for being ignorant? He turned then, expression unreadable. This is not punishment. It feels like it. That's because accountability often arrives wearing the same coat. She covered her mouth. For years, she had rehearsed defenses. None survived contact with precision. I loved you, Ethan said quietly. The sentence broke something in her face. Not the version you posted online. Not the woman at galas. You, when you laughed too hard at bad movies. You, when you read menus like legal contracts. You, when you were kind by accident. A tear slid down before she could stop it. I loved enough of you to ignore the rest until the rest became all there was. Please, she whispered. He continued anyway. You didn't just cheat on me, Vanessa. You trained yourself to despise anyone who loved you without performance. She sat down abruptly as though her knees had resigned. That's not true. It is. I loved you. You loved being chosen. The sentence landed cleanly. She looked away because looking at him required admitting he was right. You think I came because I'm broke? She asked suddenly, anger surfacing to rescue pride. I think desperation makes many people nostalgic. That's cruel. It's accurate. I could have rebuilt without ever speaking to you. Then why didn't you? She stood again, furious now. Because no one ever knew me the way you did. He nodded once, and still you chose applause. She laughed through tears. You make everything sound so simple. No, he said. You made everything complicated so you wouldn't have to feel simple truths. She hated that her chest recognized the sentence before her mind did. The clock on the mantel struck 1. Rain softened outside. Vanessa's voice became smaller. I wake up some nights and think about that hallway. He said nothing. The suitcases. Your face. How calm you were. She pressed fingers to her lips. I told myself you didn't care. That was the only way I could live with it. Ethan looked at her for a long moment. I cared enough not to beg someone to keep me. She began crying, fully then, quietly without elegance. Not for manipulation, for memory, for the woman she had been, for the man she had mistaken, for the years no apology could purchase back. I am sorry, she said again, broken this time. I am so sorry. He believed her. That was visible in the softness of his eyes. But belief and reversal are unrelated things. When she steadied Ethan, picked up his coat. You should go home. She panicked. Is that it? What were you expecting? I don't know. Hope. He moved closer. Not intimate, but kind enough to destroy her. Hope is not the same as entitlement. I'm asking for forgiveness. You have it. She blinked. What I forgave you years ago. The room tilted. Then why? Why can't we? Because forgiveness releases anger. It does not restore trust. He placed a business card on the table, a therapist's name, highly regarded, private. She works with grief and identity trauma. Vanessa stared at the card as if it were a verdict. You think I'm broken? I think you've spent years outsourcing your worth. He opened the door for her. Outside the corridor waited silence, carpets, and distance. She looked back one last time. Did you ever miss me? Ethan's face changed for the first time all night, not into love, into sadness. More than you deserved, he said. Then he stepped aside. The elevator descended too quickly. By the time Vanessa reached the lobby, dawn was beginning to dilute the sky. She stood on the sidewalk, clutching the therapist's card, rain now reduced to mist. For years, she had feared Ethan would humiliate her. Instead, he had done something worse. He had understood her completely and refused to hate her. Upstairs, Ethan remained alone in the library. Leonard Hale entered from a side door, carrying tomorrow's briefing folder. She gone. Yes. Messy no. Leonard studied him. You all right? Ethan looked at the extinguishing fire. No, he said honestly, but I'm correct. Leonard sighed. That's a lonely hobby. Ethan almost smiled. Outside Boston brightened by degrees. Inside, the past finally had nowhere left to hide. Spring came to Boston carefully. The city thawed in increments. Patches of grass appearing beneath dirty snowbanks. Cafe chairs returning to sidewalks. Strangers believing in second chances because sunlight lasted 20 minutes longer. Vanessa Cole did not believe in second chances. Not anymore. She had spent years assuming consequences would arrive: loudly lawsuits, humiliation, public ruin, some cinematic punishment worthy of the damage she caused. Instead, consequence had arrived quietly. It wore Ethan's calm voice. It handed her a therapist's card. It forgave her and kept walking. That proved harder to survive than hatred ever could have. 3 weeks after the gala, Vanessa sat in the waiting room of Dr. Miriam Adler, the therapist whose card remained creased from being gripped too tightly. The office overlooked the public garden. Bookshelves lined one wall. No inspirational quotes. No scented candles. No tricks. When Dr. Adler entered, she was in her 60s, composed and impossible to impress. Why are you here? She asked after introductions. Vanessa gave the polished version first. Stress, career uncertainty, relationship patterns. Dr. Adler listened politely, then said, Why are you really here? Vanessa stared at her hands. Because the only person who ever loved me clearly walked away. The words shocked her by sounding true. Therapy was less dramatic than movies promised. No miracles, no speeches, just repeated excavations. Why did admiration feel safer than intimacy? Why did kindness feel boring? Why had she mistaken being envied for being valued? Why had she needed rooms full of strangers to drown out one honest silence at home? Some sessions she left angry. Some she left empty. Some she left understanding, 1 inch more than before. Healing, she learned, was humiliatingly unglamorous. Her business shrank before it stabilized. The clients who wanted illusion disappeared first. The ones who wanted competence stayed. Vanessa let go of rented status symbols one by one. The luxury lease, the designer storage unit, the memberships she could no longer justify. She moved into a smaller brownstone apartment in Beacon Hill with creaking floors and ordinary windows. For the first time in years, no doorman announced her name. No one cared what handbag she carried. At first, anonymity felt like death. Then unexpectedly, it felt like oxygen. She cooked her own meals. She walked to work. She apologized to two former friends without expecting anything back. One accepted, one did not. Both responses felt fair. In New York, Ethan Mercer remained exactly what the public imagined, and nothing like it privately. Mercer Global announced a major healthcare logistics initiative that expanded pediatric treatment access across 3 states. Business channels praised strategic foresight. Shareholders praised returns. Boards praised leadership. Ethan praised no one on television. He gave fewer interviews than ever. At 44, he had mastered the art of being visible without becoming available. Yet private life remained stubbornly human. Some nights, he still replayed Boston's hallway. Not because he wanted Vanessa back, because betrayal leaves architecture in the mind long after occupants leave. He dated occasionally intelligent women, accomplished women, kind women. Nothing lasted. Leonard Hale once asked over dinner, "High standards or old scars?" Ethan replied, "Efficient screening." Leonard snorted. "That means scars." In early May, Vanessa received an envelope from Mercer Global Foundation. Her pulse stumbled before she opened it. Inside was not a letter from Ethan. It was a grant notice. Her modest mentorship program for young women entering marketing and design, an idea she had launched quietly through Dr. Adler's encouragement, had been selected for non-profit funding. Anonymous donor. But the handwriting on the attached note was Leonard Hale's. "Use it well. Do not romanticize this gesture." No signature needed. Vanessa laughed and cried at once. Even now, Ethan refused performance. He would help children, cities, strangers, and perhaps indirectly her project, but never in a way that invited emotional debt. She sat by the window for a long time, holding the letter. Love, she realized, had not vanished from him. It had simply matured beyond possession. Months later, they met one final time, by accident, or something close enough. A rainy afternoon in Manhattan. Vanessa was in the city for a client meeting and ducked into a quiet bookstore cafe near Bryant Park. She removed her coat, turned, and saw Ethan standing at the counter with a coffee and a stack of biographies. For a second, both simply existed. Then he nodded. "Vanessa." "Ethan." He looked well. Tired around the eyes, perhaps. More real than magazine photos. "You read biographies now?" she asked. "I always did. Public failure is educational." She smiled despite herself. They sat for 10 minutes. No grand music, no trembling confession. Just two people who once destroyed each other in slower ways. She told him about the mentorship program. He said that was good. He mentioned nothing about the grant. She mentioned nothing about knowing. Finally, she asked, "Are you happy?" He considered the question seriously. Sometimes he said, more honestly than before. That sounded like him. "And you?" he asked. She inhaled. Sometimes she answered, less beautifully than before. That sounded like truth. When they rose to leave, she touched his sleeve lightly. I loved you, she said. It was the first time she had spoken the sentence without asking it to rescue her. Ethan's eyes softened. I know, he replied. You just didn't know how. Then he walked toward the door. She did not follow. This time losing him was not an event, it was an understanding. Years earlier, Vanessa had believed wealth was safety. Then she lost wealth and survived. She believed status was identity. Then she lost status and remained. She believed beauty was power. Then time negotiated that claim. But real love, steady, inconvenient, undesigned love, was rarer than all of it. And once betrayed deeply enough, it did not always return. Outside, rain moved across Manhattan in silver sheets. Vanessa watched Ethan disappear into the crowd, one figure among thousands. No chauffeur opened an umbrella for him. No cameras marked the moment. Still, it felt monumental. Because she finally understood the cost of seeing. Clearly, money can be rebuilt. Reputation can be managed. Even self-respect can be earned back slowly. But some forms of love arrive, once ask quietly to be valued, and leave forever when they are not.